Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 232 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, your one-stop shop for all things FCPA compliance related. Today I have with me Kristy Grant-Hart. She is the author of a recent book on how to be a wildly effective compliance officer. The episode comes in at just over 18 and a half minutes. I hope you will enjoy it. I'd also like to announce registration is now open for my next FCPA Masterclass. I'm going to hold this one in New York, so if you're in New York, New Jersey, or anywhere in the tri-state area, this will be the class for you. This is a unique opportunity for any level of FCPA compliance practitioner to learn about best practices in a compliance program. I limit the registration to 10 people so that it is a truly intense training and experience. So check out my website, Advanced Compliance Solutions, and registration information is available there. Or you can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Next up, Kristy Grant-Hart. Thank you for listening. Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today, I am very pleased to have with me Kristy Grant-Hart. Kristy is known to many of us in the compliance community. She formerly served as the Chief Compliance Officer for United International Pictures and was shortlisted for the 2015 Chief Compliance Officer of the Year Award at the Women in Compliance Awards. But most recently, and the reason she's taken the time to visit with us today, is she has released her first book, or at least assume it's your first book, entitled How to Be a Wildly Effective Compliance Officer. So with that somewhat long-winded introduction, Kristy, thanks for taking the time to visit with us, and also welcome from London.
Thank you. It is my first book, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, having written several books myself, I'm always intrigued when another compliance practitioner writes a book, particularly focusing not on really the technical requirements of doing anti-corruption compliance, because I think many of us understand that, but really how to be a compliance officer, and that's the exact space you've entered into. So tell us, what were you trying to do, and how did you go about doing it?
Sure. Well, I wrote the book primarily because I saw many of my colleagues just really struggling with getting the buy-in from the business and even understanding how to do that really effectively. There's so many talented compliance people who come from law or audit or other backgrounds that aren't really taught about motivation, persuasion, how to really affect emotionally the people who you need to affect. And so I decided to write it really to help those people that I thought I could. And I started writing it on airplanes. I was traveling to 40 countries in the last 3 years to do training on basically every continent except Antarctica, and thought I could use that time wisely to write something that might help the profession.
Well, you have certainly done that. It is a short, crisp, really to the point with a lot of practical advice. The one thing that you have done extremely well, which I would say I don't do as well, is you put in some graphics in the forms of charts and other types of graphics that I think really help the compliance practitioner. And really to start with, I'd like to start with one that I found on page 41, which is entitled The Compliance Dashboard. And in this, you lay out really in a format that I think any compliance professional who's got to comply with any law, whether that be me, the FCPA, you, the Bribery Act, or anything in between, can use. So could you maybe just walk us through the compliance dashboard and how you would advocate or at least suggest a compliance practitioner could use it?
Sure. Well, this was actually developed by my friend Joe at Rolls-Royce. She's their head anti-bribery and corruption person. I had become chief compliance officer at UIP and said to her, I'm not sure that they're understanding what I'm doing at the board level. And she said, you need a dashboard. And I said, all right, what do I do with that? And what she suggested was creating basically a very concise chart, really, that says what each of the major elements are, usually of the 7 elements from the federal sentencing guidelines, and then what your goals are for the year, followed by what your progress to date has been. And so if you're talking about training, then, your goal for the year is to roll out the code of conduct training to all of your people, and to do in-person training, say at 5 locations. Then you'd say at the next bullet, how far you've gotten toward that. And what it does is it provides a running total across the year, not only for you to remember where you are and how much you've done, but also so that the board or whoever it is that's overseeing you has an easy way of tracking your progress and frankly being impressed by it. One of the challenges I think in compliance is if you're doing it really, really well, you may not have any issues, or your issues are small, and actually saying, look, this is how we are doing brilliantly, and I can show you my progress every month. I think it makes a tremendous difference to getting the respect of the board or of your major stakeholders, because they can see how you're progressing in a way the business understands, which is against metrics.
You said something in there that really struck me about kind of the overall tone of the book. And what you said in the answer to that last question was so that the business understands what you're doing. You've really got I think, some helpful pointers on uh, directing the compliance officer or the compliance practitioner to help the business. And you really give some specific techniques. It's not just I'm there to help the business, because you have a whole section on don't say no, don't be Dr. No, don't be from the land of no, recognizing that sometimes we as compliance practitioners do. So could you walk us through that? Because I was really intrigued and frankly gratified by that whole section.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there will be times where you have to say no, but there is a real technique to doing it in a way that the business feels either listened to, or better, that you can teach them how to come to you with something you can approve. So I think the first thing is to approach every question or every query as if you are going to figure out a solution with them. You're on team business. How do we do this? Because sometimes I think some compliance officers, they don't trust the business. They think they're sneaky. They're trying to get around them. If you come at someone with that attitude, that's generally how they will behave. So what you want to do is to create an ally relationship where they feel like you're on their team, we're on this team together. How do we make this work? So if you have to say no, the first thing I say is, please do it fast. Don't let it linger in your inbox until someone follows up with you a month later saying, wait, did you ever say anything about this? Oh, well, I was just considering it forever. Don't do that. If you know the answer is no, say it. And if you have to say no, at least do it with empathy, saying, gosh, I know this is important to you. I really wish we could figure something else out. Or even better, what is the outcome you want? The way that you want to do this is something I can't approve, but how can we maybe work together to get there in a different way? And I think the more that you can be seen as a problem solver and as a person who is trying to come to a solution, the more likely you are to be wildly effective and to have the business not only like and respect you, but to try to work with you instead of around you.
That's really, you had a phrase in there that it's not so much working with the business, but it's getting the business to understand the value you bring as the compliance officer, and just that one word, the value. Because one, you're going to keep them out of trouble, but you're going to keep them out of trouble in a way that hopefully will allow them to move forward and do the business they need. So, like I said, I was really gratified about that part of your book. One of the other things, Christy, that intrigued me is this book is written for as lofty or as an experienced as a long-term compliance practitioner, but it's also written for someone who's new to the field. And that was really driven home to me most clearly in your chart on page 118, which you entitled The Compliance Officer Decision Tree. And what really struck me there was how, just like I said, you were able to talk to the baby compliance practitioner, the newbie, all the way up to someone who's been here a while. But I was intrigued enough that wanted to ask you, could you just walk us through that so a new compliance practitioner who might be listening to this could understand how you have developed this technique to think through an initial problem before we even get to the sophisticated things you talk about later, and how to say no in a way that not only they'll accept, but they'll embrace.
Sure. Well, I love the decision tree. it was sort of a product of a fight that I had with this most senior manager, C-suite level at my last job, because I realized we were speaking in different language. She kept asking me if something was illegal. I'm a lawyer, as well as a compliance practitioner, and I kept saying yes, but, and she said, well, I'm going to tell the board you said yes. It's like, well, no, it is legal, but it's a bad idea, and I don't quite know how to make that clear. So what I did was I wrote out, this is how the decision-making process goes for me. And the first question it's 4 questions. The first one is it legal? And if the answer is no, then we don't go any further. Or, if you have to take it to the board or someone else to get them to stop, then you do that. But if the answer is yes, the query, it's legal, then the next question 2, is it ethical? And this, again, is pretty yes or no. If it isn't ethical, we stop, or we go to the board and get someone to stop it. But if it is both legal and ethical, then you get into the more complex elements of what we do. So question 3 then becomes, is it against our policies or our procedures? And if the answer is yes to that one, then you have 2 choices. You can either change or amend your policies, or you can make an exception. Or if the answer is no, then it goes to the last question, which is this a bad idea? And this, I think, is where compliance officers can get in the most trouble, because if the answer is yes, it's a bad idea, your job is to talk about risk and let the business make the final choice. Tell them what the problems are, what the issues are, what could happen, and then it's really up to the risk appetite, because you've already gone through the procedure. You know that it's legal and ethical, and if it's against the policy, you can make an exception. But if it's a bad idea, it's not your call. And I think compliance officers are frequently asked essentially to be the scapegoat, to say, well, it's not ethical, it is ethical, it's not illegal, we can do it. When really the question is, it's a bad idea, but that's not my choice to make.
Christy, you have a chapter which you've entitled Working with the Industry Network. Mm-hmm. And I was really intrigued by it for a couple of reasons. One, it does directly speak to that issue, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But it seemed to me that you were laying out communication tools and techniques which are really applicable to speaking to a compliance officer's customers, who are the employees you work with in a company. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of the things you talk about in that chapter, and then also the chapter entitled I'm the Expert?
Right. So the networking chapter is really about 2 different kinds of networking. One being in person at conferences that Compliance Week or the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics or other regional providers might have. And there's so much value there, I found. Enormous value, particularly for benchmarking purposes, to find out what other people are doing. We have this remarkable capacity to learn from each other. And I think that you're really hamstrung if you're not able to get into that environment where you can share with each other. Because as the regulations shift and change constantly, so does the expectations of the regulator based on what others are doing. And it's wonderful that we have these places to go to learn from each other and really to connect. And the second part of that one about being the expert, I have found it, I speak quite frequently and do a lot of writing, and I really love that position where you get to tell people about what you know, and I think that it really facilitates the relationships, and the compliance is such a small place, really, in the world, that it's very easy to become known for some aspect of it, like you, of course, Tom Fox, everyone knows you, because of all the writing that you do, and as being a subject matter expert, but honestly, there are so many outlets and such a need for more people writing, more people speaking, that there's real opportunity here, and it's exciting for people in our field.
There is one point on your list of 7 steps to creating a successful article I'd like to focus on just for a moment. And that's number 6, find a publisher. And what I'd like to say to any compliance practitioner out there listening, finding a publisher is one of the easiest things to do. There are innumerable publications that want content, and they want good content, and they'll take your content. It doesn't matter what you have to say. You can be the first day compliance practitioner, and your experience is going to be valuable. People like me and Christy. You can be a 20, 30 or less compliance practitioner, and your experience is going to be valuable. But finding a publisher in our industry is really one of the easiest things to do. And if you don't think you have something to say, all I have to say is you do have something to say, and I want to hear it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my pitch.
Join the Malee. It's fun.
Yes, yes. And finally, let me ask you about your chapter entitled Dealing with the Hard Stuff. Because you're right, there are going to be things that are hard. So how do you ground yourself either before, during, or after you've had to have one of those hard discussions, hard conversations? You have a CEO that doesn't understand you or doesn't want to accurately represent you, what you've said to the board.
I think that there's several things to do. The first is simply to acknowledge that this job is hard, and that it is emotionally draining because most of the people who come into it really want to do the right thing. And for me, part of refocusing when I've had a really bad day or a bad conversation is to say, hold on, I'm on a mission here. I'm on this wonderful mission as part of this compliance movement to change the world. And it may sound lofty, but I fundamentally believe that we are here changing the world for the better. And hard conversations and re-educating people and helping them to understand why what I'm asking them to do is important or not do is important is part of the greater purpose of what we're doing. I think coming back to that space, also connecting back into your network at that point, helping, it really helps me to talk to other people in my field who have had bad days, projects that went terribly wrong, regulatory investigations, fines, all that stuff that's part and parcel really to the job, to remind yourself, we're in this together and that's why we're here, to make it a better place.
Kirsty, I wanted to leave a little bit of time for you to tell us about your new endeavor of Spark Compliance Consulting and what that is about.
Sure. Well, I felt like I had the opportunity to help more than one company, and that's really what I want to do. So after starting 2 international compliance programs from scratch, I decided that I'd like to help other companies, particularly either in London or in Europe, where we haven't had it build so much, that I can help them to create and implement them. And the secondary thing I really want to focus on is empowering compliance officers. So doing the kind of training for influence and persuasion, structuring the programs really effectively, helping them with their strategies to get resources from the board, and really being their ally in a consulting capacity so that they can be as effective as possible.
And how would someone reach you? And more importantly, how do they get a copy of this book? Where can they go?
Sure. So you can reach me. My website is www.compliancechristy, which is compliance, Kristy, to reach me directly, or sparkcompliance.com. The book is available in bookstores, at Amazon.com in both Kindle and print form, BarnesandNoble.com, Kobo, Apple, everywhere. So hopefully you can find it pretty easily and get yourself a copy.
Well, I would certainly second that notion, and I really appreciate the time and effort that you put into not only this podcast, but really this book, because I found a lot of great information in it. It really speaks to, I think, the entire spectrum of seniority and experience in the compliance practitioner world, from really like I said, the first day newbie up to really to people like you and me. So thank you for taking the time to put into this book. It's going to be a well-worn and well-read addition to my library. Thanks very much for taking the time to visit with us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. I would like to also remind you about my FCPA Masterclass training. As I indicated, that I hold this to 10 people, and the reason I do this is to give you a very intense best practices experience where we share ideas about compliance best practices going forward. So if you're in New York, New Jersey, or the tri-state area, I hope you'll consider joining me. If not, I look forward to visiting with you again on the next episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. This is Tom Fox, and thank you very much for listening.